My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Layne Witherell today. It's April. It's April 16th, 2025. I'm living in the future already. Layne, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this, and we're excited to hear from you. And let's start with the first question, the most important question. Why wine?
Well, let's start at the beginning if we can. I just turned 80, and I was born in Los Angeles, 1945. My dad died when I was young, so I got to invent myself. Not a lot of people get to invent themselves. And I grew up in Los Angeles in the 60s. Yes, yes, I did. And maybe you might want to take notes, the people who are seeing this, because I'm going to throw some names at you that you may or may not have ever heard. So the places that I hung out in as a kid were the Fifth Estate, which was a coffee house. The Beatniks were still around, and that was where the LA Free Press, the first underground newspaper, got published. The other place that was really probably the most near and dear to my heart, and I still follow that, was the Ash Grove. The Ash Grove on Melrose was a coffee house that was about folk music. But during the 60s, you still had a lot of these old blues people around. And they played there. And as a young guy, Fred McDowell, Booker White, all of them, I got to see all of the original blues guys right there on the spot. And that's carried with me through my entire life. I've got a pretty good collection of all their stuff. So I'm getting to the point now in 65. I'm 20 years old. I'm not in college. I have a draft card in my pocket. And I'm taking a look at the future not being very bright. So I decide to go down and enlist in the Navy. It was like, okay, either do this or wind up in a rice paddy somewhere. So I do that. And they asked me, what do you want? What do you want to do? I said, I don't care. Anything dangerous. I'm a young punk out of LA. I don't really care. Come on. I'm inventing myself. And they said, how about submarines? Would you like submarines? I said, sure, give me submarines. So I signed up for submarines and served on the oldest World War II diesel submarine in the U.S. Navy as a punk kid. So they decommissioned it. And you have a submarine in Portland, Oregon. You got an old diesel down in the Science Center. So you get some diesel fuel and battery acid and splash it on yourself and you'll be right at home. So they decommissioned it, and I've never been out of LA, really. I mean, I was in New York a little bit on the sub. So I get stationed in a submarine tender in Rota, Spain. This is the 1960s. Spain was in the 1660s. So we couldn't wear our uniforms off base because of the top secret character of the submarine tender. We had nukes coming under cover of darkness to be repaired. And the book is called Blind Man's Bluff. I never thought anybody write about that, but they did. And so we could go off base, but we could never wear our uniform. For me, that's like, man, I'm in LA again. This is so cool. So this is and it's in my book about going to a bodega where no Americans ever go. I didn't have a picture in the book, but here's the picture. This is a bodega in southern Spain, in Rota. And the guy is a sharecropper. And there are two bottles on the table. The Coca-Cola bottle is the best sherry, and the bottle in his hand is the second best. And he's blendoing the two to make a tasty beverage. And that's where I learned about wine, was from guys like him, from Emilio. And we were treated well because we were just hanging out. We were good guys. This is the only photo I have of that whole era. So I get out of the Navy, 1970. And I say, well, I got to go to college. This is, GI Bill, or feeling all sorry for the Vietnam vets. They didn't treat us well when we got out, but they gave us a free ride education. So from top secret nuclear things, missiles, I enroll in San Francisco State University. Now, Berkeley gets all the credit, and San Francisco State did all the heavy lifting. They had Angela Davis, they had the Panther Party, they had the Chicano Revolution, they had everybody. I'm just happy to be in college. I got to tell you, I'm like, you go on board a diesel submarine for a little while and you'll see how great college looks. So I go to work as a book buyer in an old bookstore in San Francisco, Holmes Book Company. I still have some of their publications. They're long gone. And I'm loving this because the Beats are still around. You got all the punks around, early 70s San Francisco. I go see a guy named John Fahey play his music. I've got every album he ever recorded. He's worth the price of admission. I get to see Charles Bukowski. You look up Charles Bukowski, doesn't YouTube? He's the most outrageous poet that's ever lived. Get to see him. We get to see all of the psychedelic artists in San Francisco. And I got the wine bug early on, 1970. I looked at Karen Hinsdale's interview, and she has a different form of wine bug. She's got it up here. I'm a vernacular guy, so I've got the vernacular wine bug. I go down the street from where I'm working, and it's the industry headquarters for the California wine industry. And since we're an antiquarian bookstore and we deal with collectors, we call our collectors when we're getting stuff in and we'll hold it for them. So the librarian there she was a serious collector. And she said, hey, if you want, you can come on in and you can use our files for your research. So I did my thesis on early California wine, 1830 to 1870. I still have a couple of books that I used for that. I had to find the original people. There's the Bob Dylan thing behind you. He says, I was there when the original people were there. Well, yeah, I was too. So we went not to Napa, we went to Amador. And I found Frank Nervo in Sonoma and Amador County. God, we go to Gold Rush country and Sutter Creek. And there's this guy in an Episcopal outfit doing a yard sale in front of the church. His name is E. Frank Enriquez, 1975. This is his book, E. Frank Enriquez, The Signet Encyclopedia of Wine. And what makes it great is that he lists the price of every single wine of 20,000 wines. And you can look up. That's why in Oregon you're drinking all this Burgundy, because Christ, Pomar was $6 a bottle. Iced Cabernet was $14 a bottle. So you're drinking great Burgundies for not much money. I was drinking great Burgundies for not much money. So the other guy, and this is a guy who's, if you're into marketing, you need to look up this guy, James Arthur Field. James Arthur Field was an advertising exec who took early retirement to make the Ben & Jerry's of jug wines. He had a white label with James Arthur Field written out, and on the bottom it said, white wine, California. And he got his wine from Pedroncelli. Like my Spanish guy, he did Mendo Blendo from Pedroncelli, and he made a vastly more expensive wine than Pedroncelli. We were drinking Pedroncelli in the U.S. Cafe in San Francisco, and they were serving it in gallon jugs under the table. and they pour into your glass. It wasn't a wine glass, it was a water glass, and they chalk mark how much you'd had, and that appeared on your bill when you came up. This is 1970 San Francisco classic. So I got to know him, and he showed me Mendo Blendo, showed me how he did what he did. He died a couple of years ago at the age of 99. James Arthur Field was a classic. So I'm going to go on and get my master's, and I'm about a year in. I've already done my thesis on California wine. They hated it in the history department. I mean, hated it. It's like soiling the halls of academia. Well, that was all, I had unpublished manuscript sources. I had all the stuff you've never seen before in your life, but they hated it. So I'm going to go on, and they changed it to where it's a PhD now to teach. I said, damn, what am I going to do? So my wife and I go to have dinner at a local restaurant, and Ben Johnson's Steakhouse. And I ordered my usual Bordeaux. They said, sorry, Mr. Witherell, we're out of stock. Tough. But he said, I got something else. I got something new that just came in. I think you'll really like this. He pours Stag's Leap 1973 Cabernet Sauvignon in the glass. I said, and to quote Matt Kramer, great wine makes you feel like a genius. I said, it does. I felt like a genius. And this, I said, I got to go out and buy some of this. I got to buy a case of this. Well, I go out Monday, and the San Francisco Chronicle says this is the wine that whipped up on the French and changed the world. I went to my local wine merchant, said, you got any? He laughed at me. He said, yeah, right. I had a case. I sold it for $150 a bottle, and it's gone. So that's it. So I said, it's time to reinvent myself again. And we'd vacationed in Oregon. I said, well, let's go to Oregon. So I had in the Oregonian, a little help wanted thing for sales. I figured, well, I'm a pretty good bookseller. Why don't I see how I'll do with wine? Let's check it out. So I went up to Oregon. I interviewed with this company. Robert Hughes, the great art historian, I'm a big art nut, wrote a book called The Things I Didn't Know. And this fit in perfectly with the things I didn't know. I'm a sales rep. I'm in the old beat up company vehicle. I got 2 cups of coffee of indeterminate age and all of the maps and charts and stuff. The thing I didn't know was something called dock sales. I didn't know dock sales. I didn't know what it was. And I called on some stores, and they said, get out of here. We don't want to talk to you. We don't want to deal with you. So I was like, wow, this is kind of rough. The company wasn't going that well, although they were well financed. They were just amateurs of the amateur nth degree. So I said, I think I'll check out Oregon wines. I had this little Tom Stockley pamphlet, 1977, and the quote is, touring Oregon wine country now is like touring Napa in the turn of the century. Cool. So I get in my little car and I go to Dave Lett's place, Irie. There he is. There's Dave Lett in all his shining glory. You don't get a great reception at Irie in 1977. You're lucky he lets you in the door. It's a turkey processing plant. He's got all these old barrels, and I knew enough about seeing wineries to know that this is a funky operation, but I also knew enough to know that this stuff is good. And it took me until fairly recently to figure out, to go past that whole climate, terroir, all of that myth making that we've done, which is real. But the big difference in California at the time in the US, because California was the US, the grape varietal was 51%, and 49% could be anything else. And so it'll work with cab. Yeah, nicely. It'll work with Chardonnay, you know, a little Uni Blanc splash into Chardonnay. Yeah, it'll work well. They do that. A lot of people do that. Gewürztraminer and Chardonnay, come on. But the difference was this guy was using 100% Pinot Noir, which is something we had never seen. And they always blamed it on the, you know, the climate, wrong climate, wrong. Okay. No, you're seeing Pinot Noir the way that they actually did it in Burgundy as 100% Pinot Noir. So I go visit, my next stop is Ponzi, my little tour. Ponzi's in his garage. Cool little garage. Ponzi was good. I was like, this guy's good. He is cool. Then I go to Adelsheim, same deal. Dave is in his garage. Then I go visit Charles Corey. The rest of these guys are dirtbag idealists. And I know I have a pretty good idea about wine and Mendo Blendo from James Arthur Field. He's got all stainless steel tanks. And he's talking about Riesling. Dave Lett is talking Pinot Noir. Ponzi is eyeball deep in Pinot Noir, and Corey is talking Riesling. And that, having been a wine writer, I've been a wine writer for 30 years. And I know when you're a good one, and I know when they're lying like a dog to you. Corey was so he had the image. The articles in the Oregonian was him with the tonsure, the thumb, the little cigarette butt. He could have been a great American artist of the 70s. And you just take that and put that on winemaker, and there was Charles Corey. I mean, he was out there having his little dance band out in the parking lot. He actually told me where to park. There's nobody else in the damn parking lot, and he's telling me where to park. Hey, over here, sucker. He was nice enough, but it was like, come on. So my last stop was Oak Knoll. And they're in a dairy barn. There's this little wizened guy in a mechanic's jumpsuit running the tasting room. And it's all covered with all sorts of wine stains. And he's nice enough, and we're tasting wine. I said, yeah, I'm in the biz. I'm wine sales rep. He said, yeah, I'm Ron Volstick. I own this joint. I'm the winemaker. He says, time to close up the tasting room. He said, would you like to come in the house? I said, sure. Yeah, come on in. We sit down in his kitchen, and he shows me all the experiments that he's doing with wine. Vinifera, fruit, all that. I mean, it's like this guy is a damn genius. It blows my mind. So he offers me his sales manager position. I become his sales manager. I'm in the car doing God's work with Pinot Noir in one hand and a bottle of Loganberry in the other, and with a genius. So where I did my best work was I knew the restaurants from my past rep days. I knew Pinot Noir was going to be a thing. So I went to Jake's Famous Crawfish, and nobody's pouring Oregon wine. Nobody. They're selling it out of their tasting room at that point. If, you know, Irie's got his chomping at the bit group of people who are coming in. Ponzi's got his people, but it's little. I mean, there's nobody around. So I managed to convince Jake's to do Pinot Noir, salmon, and a table tent, and have me come in and train. I'm like, wow, that's revolutionary. Yeah. I said, here's food, here's wine, here's local. Can't get any more local than salmon. And at that point, I thought Pinot Noir, might have a chance. Although Riesling was really a thing. I mean, Riesling, you could, with the laws being what they were then, you could dump a whole ocean of Riesling into Oregon and nobody know the difference. Thank you, Dave Adelsheim, for the AVA world, because Dave plugged that pipeline tight and made Oregon have an identity. On his tombstone should say, Dave Adelsheim, you gave us an identity. So I'm running around the countryside selling Oak Knoll wine. And I read Ron's, or I saw Ron's interview. He kind of played down fruit and berry. And frankly, I had a distributor up in Seattle, and a good distributor, big distributor. And I went up and I did a wine tasting with the local wine writer. And I brought the Riesling, the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, all that stuff. And I had a bottle of Loganberry just for fun. And the article, and probably only Marge Volstead has this article. I've since lost it. It's called "A Bottle of Logie Crashes the Party." And it did. They were so blown away by this stuff. Jerry Looper, winemaker, Freemark Abbey, when they were the big dogs, said, "Ron, you're the Chateau Lafite of fruit and berry wines." Yeah. That's how good that stuff was. He chased me around. He said, "Layne, I got this new strawberry." It wasn't a vintage, it was a crop. He said, "I want you to trade out the old strawberry, which is still good, it's still usable, from the distributors, and I want you to bring the new strawberry in here because it's the best." I was like, "Okay, Ron, yeah, vintage. Vintage dated fruit wine. Who knew?" So I went from Oak Knoll. Well, actually, there's one more Oak Knoll. We wanted to get bigger because he had 6 kids. What do you do but get bigger when you have 6 kids? Either that or go out of business. So we were in the grocery stores, and Ron and I said, "Well, we got to go see our distributor, L.C. Giusti." Al Giusti was the godfather. You know, he could punch that button and you could fall down the trap and never be seen again. He was that big and that powerful. Almaden and Gallo ruled. They ruled the stores. The Almaden rep said, "Pile it high, sell it fast, take the money to the bank." And that was the grocery store world in the 70s in Oregon. So we went to Al one Saturday morning, and Ron's there, I'm there, and we said, "Look, I've got the numbers on the restaurants. These are good numbers. And your guys, it's from you, and you're delivering it, but we did the work. I went out there and put that Pinot Noir out there and did all that. We would like to climb up from the bottom shelf, which is where we are, 2 shelves, maybe not waist level, maybe waist level if we're lucky, into the real world in grocery stores." And when you're talking to big distributors and you're talking to grocery stores, they want numbers. When you're talking to a wine shop, you can say, "How are them ducks doing this year?" And that's fine. You can do that. And that gets you in. But when you're in a grocery chain, you better talk numbers. You can't talk about football scores or basketball. So Al looks at the numbers. He goes, "Wow, this is all right. I'll make that happen." That's what happens when they make it happen. So we do the quickest 2-shelf upward mobility in the history of Oregon wine. And we're suddenly in the grocery stores and we're suddenly up. I move on. I go to Montana and reinvent myself. That's who I am. I'm running a wine distributor in Missoula, Montana. That's when the state went open. And the state went open, meaning grocery stores can sell wine, and restaurants and all that. It's no longer a state system. So there are 2 distributors. There's the Gallo House and there's me. I've got everything else. And Gallo has all the business. Two people I met who were remarkable. One was my sales crew, the Bopadips, look them up. They were a show band. So when they weren't out selling wine, they were show banding it up. And you look up Missoula, Montana, and the top hat of then and the top hat now, a little funky club, are very different. Top hat then was the 300-pound person with a boa constrictor who got up on the bar and swung around. Now it's very yuppie, very cool. "Oh, we're very cool." The other person was the most important person I've ever met, maybe in my whole life, other than Judy, my wife. John Fraunfelder. I don't know if anybody will mention John Fraunfelder in these interviews. I looked up Pilar, Greg Lemma's daughter's interview, and went through all that. Fraunfelder was the regional manager for Seagram Chateau and Estates, and they were the #1 importer in the United States by far. Fraunfelder was in his 50s, didn't cut a striking figure, but he was a genius. He tasted every wine on the planet, and he became my guru for wine. So he said, Layne, how you like Montana? And I said, well, I don't hunt, I don't fish. I'm sitting in front of this library. That's kind of who I am. He said, well, I got a guy in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, who'd like a new general sales manager, and somebody come in and shake it up. I said, yeah, I'll shake it up. Greg Lemma. So I get hired by Greg to be his right-hand man. Now, I wouldn't have said this had he still been in business, but I'm going to get real candid about Greg Lemma and his operation, because Pilar, his daughter, has one vision. I have another vision. Greg was not a great people person. He was not, but damn it, he was a genius sitting behind that computer buying wine. Instead of sending Pilar out to do the little mom and pops and the how are them ducks doing sales call, if she'd have sat next to him and gotten that DNA from a genius, that's one thing. The second thing, and I learned this, every day here. If you're going to have a multi-generational business, you buy the building. You have to buy the building. And when she said, well, we had to go out of business, he could have bought that building for no money when he started. I mean, it was in Southeast Portland. There's nobody there. If Euphoria Tavern, come on, Euphoria Tavern, Holy Modal Rounders, nobody wants to go hear that. But Greg, I went into his office one day. I was his front man. I was the guy who saw all the people. Greg was the guy who did all the ordering, all the buying. I go into his office one day and he says, and he's got Chateau and Estates big time. He is like the big dog of C&E. His partners early on tried to take the company away from him. And they didn't succeed because Fraunfelder went with Greg and brought Chateau and Estates. That's the clout of Fraunfelder. So Greg says, well, Layne, they're releasing 67 Chateau Cam right now, and this is the most expensive white wine in the whole world. I mean, this is it. And I thought, we'll probably buy 5 cases. He says, no, I got 50 cases on order. And what that tells me is this guy can play the stock market of wine unlike anybody. There's nobody who even comes close. The big thing that we did there was to buy a collection from a man who invented the pitching machine. And he was a wholesaler, and Greg sent me over to talk to this guy and taste the wine, because it was all great provenance. Everything was perfect. And you open that wooden case, you taste. And I said, man, this is it, Greg. This is the real deal. This is Le Marché as the real deal. This is Bordeaux as the real deal. This guy, just let's do it. Phil DeVito, bless you for having the Phil DeVito archive. Phil was working on the Wine Spectator Grand Award when it meant something. Now it doesn't mean much. Now everybody is dog. Joe Blow's Tavern can get a goddamn Wine Spectator Grand Award. It's like a 90-point score. I got a 90-point score. It means nothing. Whereas Phil was like, oh my God, he went to his people and said, I got a collection. This is a collection. And he put it in, and they got the Grand Award Wine Spectator that year. That was Greg Lemma's contribution. Where it went bad was these little California wineries. We did a lot of Oregon. We did Sokolblosser, Elk Cove, Henry Estate. We were the pioneers of these people. They came in, they never had a distributor. Pat Campbell, oh God, I adore Pat Campbell. We had a bad bottle one day. It was corked. Come on, I knew corked. And I called her. I said, Pat, we got a corked bottle. And she yells at the phone. We've never had a bad bottle, ever. And she gets in the car and drives from Gaston to the warehouse and comes in, smells the wine, and goes, you're right, it's a bad bottle. I got one in the car, I'll replace it. That's the level of commitment that these wineries had. She wasn't playing games, man. That's commitment. So Henry Estate, the best Rioja Pinot Noir I've ever tasted in my life. Sokolblosser, Bill Blosser, they're pros. There was no doubt from day one. These guys knew who they were, and they were professionals in doing what they did. Where we had problems as a distributor, and Pilar mentioned this, and she didn't go into specifics, but the California wineries that we had were small, but they had this whole thing about getting really big. And the guy who got big was Sutter Home. They came in and they practically begged me to take 50 cases of this wine that they made a mistake making, called White Zinfandel. I said, yeah, I can drink it. I'll sell it. I'll go out to a singles bar and put it up by the glass, and our 50 cases will be gone, and you'll be happy. So they pour this thing, and I get a phone call about a week later saying, I want more. I want another 50 cases. I want as much of this stuff as you can get. And so time goes on, like a month, and we make a visit from the winery, and they say, well, here's the deal. We want you to do something for us. And it's not numbers. It isn't increase the sales. It's margin. We want you to play margin. Greg won't do that. Greg is playing the other end. He's buying all that Chateau Chem like it's his bank, like he's a stockbroker. He's not going to buy on bad margin. And they walked out the door, and that was a third of my money that walked out the door, because I was salary and commission. And I, had a former wife who liked a lifestyle that was a little more exorbitant than the lifestyle that I'm usually used to, or become used to. And that was a good lifestyle. So I get a phone call. Word's out, I'm going to be leaving. Get a phone call from the number 2 guy at Chateau Estates in New York. And he says, and this isn't in the book, some of the stuff, you get to see that's not in the book. He says, I'd like to come visit in Portland, come see you, take you out to dinner. Okay. So Greg and I have key accounts. He's got the store, Strohacker, monster store. Woo, what store? You go down that basement. Oh my God, it's King Tut's tomb without the gold, but the gold is in those cases. I had the big restaurants, and I like it. I'm a key account guy. I don't dislike small accounts, but I like that. I like that battle. I like that war. And Mr. Milligan comes in. We sit down in the restaurant. He gets the big wine list, opens it. He goes, wow, that's all our stuff. I said, no, 10% of it is the competition, because you don't want to take all their stuff. You don't want them coming in here whining and crying every 5 minutes. You want to make them earn something that'll get you back in the playing field. But he says, well, I've got an offer for you. He said, it's a district manager for number 2 market in the United States, which is Los Angeles. New York, number 1, LA, number 2. And I'm a vernacular. my job, perhaps. Because I was a student. Braunfelder brought me up to study. All these books aren't here for nothing. I study every day. I read every. So I say, well, I got to go back home and I got to check with my wife, see what she says. She says, under no circumstances are we going to Los Angeles. I would have to go to work. I think that's, Myron Redford, I think of all the interviews you do, the most candid and the one that you go to first in terms of the belly of the beast of the wine business, of the greatest and the worst. It's Myron Redford, and he lays it all on the line. I didn't know him all that well when I was there, but after hearing that interview, it's the heart and soul of the wine business, this guy. So, what do? I get a call from the chain buyer of one of the guys that we've been doing business with. He says, I'd like to come see you. I have an idea. Okay, idea. He says, I have stores in 5 states. I want to do a direct import. And I want you to clear the wines for me. I've got a distributor in Oregon that you can deal with. I got a guy in Washington. You'll travel 5 states and you'll go to Europe. And you'll be a broker. So yeah, I'll live in Portland. That's pretty good. It's hard. You're on the road, but why not? I've been on the road. I'm used to being on the road. And I go to France. I put together a group of people who are really good people. They're honest. They're not going to go behind my back and stab me. A lot of Pilar's talk was wineries, especially in a market that is not a franchise. When a franchise, so what? Burn winery down. I don't care. Non-franchise, you have a bad hair day and you're gone as a distributor. That's it. So you're constantly on that wire, and you just like that, you can fall off that wire. So what I did with my distributors was I said, look, I've got relationships with these people and I'm going to back you. I'm not going to squirrel around your brands. I'm not going to take them to somebody else. We'll bring them in your assigned territory. You've got the whole state. For good or bad, you do what you do, but I'm running these things through the chain and they're direct imports, and I've got 5 states. So, wow, that's pretty cool. I wanted an Oregon wine so bad. I could taste it. I went to Oregon wineries and sorry, we're not big enough. Sorry, that's it. Sorry. So I had a spreadsheet and I knew this thing was, if I didn't get a brand, hopefully a big Oregon brand, I knew it was finite. So when it was, I went to my distributor in Oregon and I said, well, here's the deal. I'm probably looking at going out of business in a year. He said, no, you're not. He says, I'll buy your company. He said, you've been good to me. He said, you've been honest. Most aren't. This is not a state where anybody has control of anything, but you're honest. And he said, you go to your accountant and you bring in one number and I'll write you a check. And I got out whole. Wow, I'm whole. Was on the road for, I don't know, years. And it was cool. I mean, I saw a lot of people in Europe. The number one thing that I did, I had somebody who owed me a favor from Lemon days. He had a California Napa winery that was famous, but at the time was dissed by Parker. Robert Parker, toilet plunge, dissed him. A few years later, he became #1 wine spectator wine in the world. So when I met him, he was dissed. And his importer said, look, if you get him in the top restaurants, I owe you. I said, you don't owe me money. You don't owe me a dinner, but you owe me something. There'll be a day when I call you and I want something. He goes, okay. So that day came when I was selling my company, last trip to Europe, and I called him. Sunday, I'd like a visit to Romani Conti one-on-one with the winemaker. And he goes, oh, come on, Layne, I don't know. I said, well, I didn't say that when Parker was plunging you down the toilet. I just went out and made that happen for you. He said, okay. So I had a one-on-one with the winemaker, Romani Conti, and yeah, this is the Holy Grail. Everybody in Oregon talks about the Holy Grail, but I visited the Holy Grail. And the winemaker said, the quote was, you guys from Oregon are really into this stuff, aren't you? I said, yeah, no shit. We're really into this stuff. I'm drinking his Romani Conti. So former wife wants to move back east to be near the fam. So this is the thing I didn't know that I should have known and didn't. Went and I ran a winery in Virginia. That it on the one hand, we did really well because it was a good winery. They had well-sited vineyards. They were capitalized. But on the other hand, that pipeline was open at all times. And there was no Dave Adelsheim. Archie Smith III and I tried to be Dave Adelsheim. I served as the chair of the Wine Growers Advisory Board. I wrote their marketing plan. I created October Virginia Wine Month, and I could not convince them to close that pipeline. I saw a bottle of Our Dog Blue that has no appellation and is disgusting beyond belief. It was like, but I got to meet, John Kluge, the wealthiest person in America, and all of that. I got to hang out in Monticello. It was pretty cool. The next stop, the gigantic wine distributor. That's where I met Judy. Best thing that ever happened to me. I had been divorced. I was single, very unhappy, and type A, working all hours. And the gigantic wine distributor that's where the business really gets rough. These guys were rough. The classic was driving around with my boss, the son of the owner, in his giant BMW, and he's got a coffee cup in one hand and his cell phone in the other. And he's driving 85 miles an hour down the interstate, and he's calling each of his reps to make sure that they are in their assigned territory. And he gets one guy who's not. Oh, he fires him right on the spot. He calls HR on his phone. Let's line him up. So when he interviews them and they have a question during the interview that he can't answer, then he calls me to come in from the rain to interview the little schlemiel and throw another one out on the street. So Judy comes down from Maine as a college student and works in the office. And the best thing ever is for someone to see the world that you're living in the wine business. Because it's all romance. When you're a wine writer, it's like, oh, this is so romantic. No, it's to be there while that guy's firing people who have families and mortgages. You see the wine business. You see it up close and personal. The things that came out of it that were cool, we did a thing called the Chesapeake Bay Wine Classic, where I got to see Josh Wesson and Kevin Zarelli and all of the people. And I got, during that time, awarded Master Night of the Vine. And Knights of the Vine are a lot of civilians, but Master Night is somebody who's done something, and you have to be recommended by a Master Knight. That's what this little thing is. And they all the plumage and all that, they anoint you. I was recommended for the work I did in Oregon with Pinot Noir and salmon. And that was awesome. Got to meet all those people. Got to meet Josh West and Kevin Zarelli, all that. So I left the gigantic wine distributor. We settled in Richmond. I've had two instances that are, I call licenses to print money. Okay, in the business. This is one. This is a wine store in Richmond, Virginia, in a strip mall. On one hand is U Crops Grocer, 85% market share, no alcohol. The other side is the ABC store with liquor, and then you're the wine store. And I read the Crittendens on their thing in Oregon Wine, but my guy was Stan the Man. Stan the Man was probably one of the greatest sales reps I've ever met. And having been in management and having been a hard ass, I know when you're playing games. I know when you're lying like a dog. Stan the Man worked harder than anybody. And I couldn't wait to sell an ocean of Oregon wine. It's like, Patty Green, come on, baby, bring it. Bring it here. We had Sokolblosser, Patty Green, Elk Cove, oh, everybody. We had everybody that was carried by Roanoke, we had, and we had them on the floor. And that was glorious. That was absolutely glorious. During that time, I wasn't a wholesaler, and I wasn't like on call 24/7. I had a lot of time. So for type A, when I use my time, I teach. I taught at the University of Virginia. I taught a wine class. I wrote a weekly wine article for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Dailies, I'm not a big fan of dailies. I like monthlies. I write for a monthly right now. Layne's Wine Gig literally refers to a monthly article where I can lay it all out. I can be me because I'm tired, as we're noticing. I had the opportunity in Richmond, Virginia, because we were close to DC, to have the greats come in and interview them. Angelo Gaia, greatest living Italian winemaker. Sitting across from Gaia with all of his wines lined up was God Gaia. I mean, I could barely write the article. I was so blown away. And a guy who I've worshiped forever, and this is when Parker bashed him. Parker bashed the hell out of Robert Mondavi. Said, well, your stuff isn't really good anymore. I mean, that puts wineries out of business. When you're just Joe Blow wine writer, so what? But when you're Parker, he says you're not good, you're dead. So my wife and I, Judy and I, sat there with the wines, lined them up with food, and said, these are food wines. That's what Robert Mondavi is. That's what I did in Oregon, food and wine. Pair them up together. That's how it works. So Robert Mondavi sends me a letter, a real letter, signed by Robert Mondavi, not a form letter. And he says, when I'm in Richmond, I'd like to have an interview with you. And I said, yeah. So this is the notebook that I carried while I was interviewing Robert Mondavi at the age of 90. The questions, the answers, did the article, Wine Visionary. Wine Visionary. Yeah. America's greatest winemaker. That was cool. There was a promise I made to Judy that when we could afford it, we would, because she's getting a little tired of the South. I'm a gypsy. I said, when we could afford it, we'll move us to Maine. And that was my promise to her. So our house doubled in value because we live in an old, cool Victorian thing. I loved it. Right down the street from where Patrick Henry gave his "Give Me Liberty, Give Me Death" speech. It doesn't get any funkier than that. That's vernacular. So we move up to Portland, Maine. She already has a job waiting for her with the Maine medical people. I don't have a job, but I got a few bucks and a resume. So I get interviews, lawyers. What do you want? What are you doing? What are you doing? I find out after a few, this is the state of Maine has taken their liquor contract and given it to a wholesaler for 10 years. And you were in charge of every drop of liquor in the state of Maine. Wow. And I was like, yeah, damn it, I'm almost 65 years old. I've been doing this shit for 40 years. So I'm going to travel 5,000 miles a month, calling on the big people, the key accounts. I have my reps are running all over. I'm going to be selling. You didn't even sell liquor. You just showed up to make sure everybody was happy. It was the pat on the head. Now on Friday, when I'd come back to town, I would always go to my favorite wine shop and talk to Chris, my favorite wine guy, and buy a bottle of Oregon wine. That's what I do. Didn't drink much liquor. So I did that. By the age of 70, on the road, 7 a.m., and seeing the side mirror a car coming up. It's a typical Maine day, rainy, miserable. It's not always miserable, but enough. And this woman smashes into the back of my car, flying off an embankment, wrapped around a tree, airbag goes off. They kind of picked me up out of the car, and I said, man, this is it. The cat has had his 9 lives, and this is it. So I retire, and I'm doing something I've always wanted to do in my whole life. And you got all those pictures behind you of all those people. I want to sit and play the blues at home. I want to be an old blues dude. And Judy buys me a Republic. I buy a National and a Mississippi Delta shining like a national guitar. And I'm sitting there playing this thing, taking lessons. And all of a sudden, a few months later, I say, Layne, you have no talent. You don't deserve these guitars. You need to sell them to somebody who can use them and do well with them. So I said, well, retirement is not looking great at this point. I'm not interested in retirement. So a Trader Joe's has just opened up down the street, and I go in with my resume. And the Captain Libby, looks at it and goes, you got to be kidding me. I'm over 70. And she says, what do you want? I said, well, I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want management. I don't want to deal with numbers. And I just want to sell wine. And she says, well, how do you sell wine? And it's taken you, an hour and some odd to hear, with passion. She says, start Tuesday. So there I am, Trader Joe's wine guy. And you don't even walk in that door without me knowing what you want and what you're doing and who you are. Come on, Holmes. I mean, you got everybody who works there in the world, everybody on the planet, mostly Gen Zs. Not many retired people, but they're there because they need to get out of the house like me, or they don't play the blues guitar worth a damn. So there they are. Love the customers. There are only 3 types of customers that I don't like out of the whole gamut of humanity. One is the TikTok people. Oh, I found it on TikTok. Yeah. The second are the Vivino people. Picture. I don't care if you take a picture of anything. It doesn't matter to me. But don't try to take that wine and make it make sense on some little pissant device that doesn't tell you anything. I'm standing here with 50 years under my belt in the business, so just ask me. The third group, and now Maine is starting to become a place where people are immigrating from New York. Pandemic. Oh my God, I got to go to Maine because it's such a great place to live and it's cheap. I mean, 7 years ago, this place was dirt cheap. So they're buying all these places. So the person walks in the door in the store, comes back to the wine department, goes, well, I'm a somm from New York. So what I do, I carry this little thing with me in my pocket. This little thing. It's dirt. All it is some damn dirt. There are fancy names for it. You can call it terroir, but it happens to be from Romani Saint Vivant. And the winemaker, Romani Conti, and I got down on our hands and knees and scraped that out of the vineyard. So you got any questions for me? Lay them on me. That's what I liked about that place. You could be you. And that was fun. That was a gas. Um, I want to leave with a thought. I have a lot of thoughts, as you've noticed, but uh, wine business globally is down. When I started in the biz, it was very few people drinking this stuff, but it was up. Every year you'd see big increases. Now it's globally big decreases. And this is what I learned at Trader Joe's, something extraordinarily important. I worked with Gen Zers. I had lunch with them every day. We'd have a whole little new crop of Gen Zers, like your person. Oh, she's taking a good set of notes. You lose that generation in the office and you're screwed. You're gone. You're out of business. So if I were a winery right now or a sales manager or whatever, I would hire a Gen Z just to know who what their culture is, who they are. I would read this book. This is your book, Corker, Hannah Crosby. She demystifies wine. One of her classics, you've just finalized a divorce, and the wine to have when you just finalize a divorce. That's Hannah Crosby's book. She is the ultimate Gen Z writer, and you've got to get into that generation. You have to learn who they are, because woe be unto you, it's going to be a rough ride. And I don't think Psalms are going to save you, much as you hope. I know there's a new Psalm thing in Sonoma. They just started 5 new Psalms or Gen Z. That won't help you. That won't save you. It's hiring Gen Zs and learning who they are. And don't try to pull stuff over their eyes. They're wiser than you think. They're more skeptical than you think. They are who they are, but you gotta know who they are. And I wasn't sitting there for all those lunch hours for 10 years next to those Gen Zs for nothing, because I adore them. But I know who they are. They're not us. So in Layne's Wine Gig, there are some articles that you can pull up on your phone. Wine and Art, which is I write every month, and I do a on stage gig. Wine and Art is when the skull and crossbones arrives on the back of your expensive bottle of wine. And I have all kinds of great bottles of wine. 2024 year in review, I review hers. Flaves is a phony wine article. Somebody writes a phony wine review about a restaurant or a wine shop that they have an incestuous relationship with. Come on, wine writers, you get double checked. Clickbait catfight is Judy. I wanted it to say chickbait catfight, but Judy corrected me. She said, come on, Layne, that's sexist. And, I know who you are. So that's a Gen Zer and a Gen Xer taking a tour. Millennial yard sale is when you have kids and you become what I call a geriatric millennial. And so you're no longer a millennial, you're getting closer to us. Thank you. Any questions out there?
Oh my God, so many questions. That's an incredible story. I think it might be as incredible as I was hoping it would be going into this. So congratulations on clearing a high bar. Just a couple of questions, just kind of general things that you've done in your life. Let's start with selling wine. Obviously, you have sold a lot of wine to a lot of people in a lot of ways. What sells wine? What is the most important thing to sell a wine?
Homework and passion. You can't go in and try to passion your way in the store or the restaurant. You got to do your homework. When I knocked off 90% of that huge wine list, I sat down with the entire wine list with the sommelier, and we came up with things that we could get rid of on the list. And then I did staff training. So the key, and that's why all these books, you've got to do your homework. And your little happy device, this little happy device, isn't going to take you to heaven anymore. It just won't. You've got to be a student, and it's good to be a student of people. People are, everybody brings their thing to the table. I had a guy And I never, until fairly recently, I never talked about being in the service because, Vietnam, we weren't treated the best. But there was a guy, a sales rep, who found out. And he went and he got an old school submarine emblem and he presented it to me. Wow. Yeah, you got me. Now that's kind of a sneaky, brilliant way, but you knowing your customer and for him to go to that length, but doing your homework. And you got to sell what you love, even if you don't drink it. Like, so I haven't had a bottle of Sutter Home White Zinfandel in forever, but I know it's well made. As long as the stuff is well made, it's saleable. I do the wine gig on stage where I have 4 wines that I haven't tasted, the audience hasn't tasted, and I had one that was a total bummer. I mean, this thing was atrocious. It was a local Maine wine. Oh. And I just said, look, this thing's atrocious. And I took them through it. I didn't have to sell it. I really don't sell wine anymore. I mean, I'm retired. But those are the keys. You got to do your homework. I checked every Trader Joe's wine that went in. I knew. I tasted. I knew what it was. I did my homework. And the customers, they will come in with their own set of preferences. You got to listen. You got to listen to what their preferences are. When I was in the wine store in Richmond, we had a couple of doctors who came in and bought Burgundy like it was a religion, and it was. And I knocked myself like this guy. I was selling Ramonet Burgundy for $40 a bottle. It's now $400. So know your customer. You don't have to play the how them ducks doing game because they'll see right through that. That's bullshit. They'll see right through it. But you gotta know what's there, what's behind that. If it's a chain, they're just there for numbers. At Trader Joe's, we brought in Oregon wines because we knew we could sell them. And that's a hard call. Because at Trader Joe's, you don't call, even on the store level, you don't call headquarters because there are no reps and say, oh, by the way, you don't do that. You don't throw that card on the table. But Joe, the other person, and myself knew we could sell Oregon wines because we'd been there and we believed in them. And I said, look, we'll bring them in. You look at the numbers. And if the numbers don't justify it, make them go away. But we'll sell them. And we sold the hell out of them. And to this day, maybe 6 months later, they're still up there and they're still selling. So you got to believe in what you're selling. You may not necessarily drink it every night, but it's good to believe in it. That's the important key. And your homework. I can't emphasize that too much.
So you obviously came into Oregon at a very interesting time when things were just starting to heat up a little bit in the wine industry, just starting to kind of see the potential. So I'm curious about now looking back 50 years later at where Oregon has come. Tell me about your impressions of Oregon wine, the growth, the evolution, where it is now.
They're good. You got too many of them. Come on, everybody's got too many of them. You're not alone. I mean, look at France. They're uprooting 20,000 acres in France. I mean, that's why the Gen Zs are so important because you got to bring your customer base along with your wines. I know you guys are true believers because I've read the interviews and I've seen the true believer thing, and that's fine. I was like an apostle in the wilderness. It wasn't quite the wilderness. There were a few of us out there apostling it up. But now you got to bring your audience up to where you are. And prices, you've heard about prices. I think prices everywhere. You got to be very conscious of your price quality relationship. You can sell a wine for $400. Sure you can. If you got somebody who wants to spend the $400 or a number of somebodies. Because rarity is just simply there are more people who want that stuff than it exists. That's all rarity is. And if you've got enough people who want it, then you won't sit on it. But there are too many wineries in the world, too many vineyards in the world, and you're mature at this point. You just are. You're mature. And I think all the wine writing and all the foof, That's not going to get it. What's going to get it are going to be the Gen Zs. You got to bring them on. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the entry into wine writing specifically. And you mentioned you've done it for a while now. You've written about wine for a long time. What prompted that as something you wanted to do, and how did it grow for you? How did you
It,
choose what to
it was a
write? And
fluke. It was a complete fluke. Like
of course,
everything else in my damn life has been a fluke. I was in the store in Richmond, Virginia, and it popped up that the daily paper needed a wine writer. Yeah, we need a wine writer. And one of my reps came in and said, "Hey, Layne, yeah, you write. You can write the English language." So the article that I submitted was like wines for a picnic. That's a pretty good start, huh? Wines for a picnic. I still have those. Oh God. So I did that every Sunday, every week. Judy is a saint. My wife is a saint because every Sunday I'd get up and I'd write a 500 to 600 word piece. Now it's a 1,250 word piece monthly. But I just did it because it was cool and it was interesting. It enabled me to keep up with what in terms of what was there. Um, I do it now because there are no guardrails. And with a daily, you got every guardrail in the world. You got to worry about NASCAR taking your space. Yeah. Hey, NASCAR just took my space for my article. Well, suck it up. Um, that's a daily. A monthly, they're a little edgier. I did a piece, oh my God, it was a piece called The Wines of NASCAR. So if a wine label became a brand for a NASCAR, and that was so out there. Um, so the monthlies are easier to write for. I just kept doing it as I could do it. And then the book. And then I said, oh, I've written enough so I can write a book. That was crazy. I can't write a book. Don't write a book. God. So I like to write. I've always written. I wrote in college for my degree. I wrote my thesis. It wasn't a Q&A thing. It was writing. I've always done that.
well, while we're talking about your book, I happen to have it here.
Ah, yeah.
Wine Maniacs. This is a
Yay.
signed copy, so it's rare, So
Woo, rare.
tell me about putting your life down on paper like that. What was the process like for you? What were the surprises?
I read Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, and I said, if he can write that and he can lay that on the table, I can write a book. Well, of course, 10 years later, takes a while. And I didn't have the editor that he had. Bourdain's mom was an editor for the New York Times. Give me a break. I didn't know that for forever. The more you put stuff down that is, and you see the label or the front cover just tells you what this thing is. It's a wine bottle in a straitjacket. So it announces to you, wine maniacs, this is going to be a little wacko journey. From the cover, I worked with cover artists, and one gal said, let me show you this. And I went, this is it. This is this book. So from the cover, it took off. Some chapters were harder to write than others because they just were. I didn't write the lemma chapter until recently. I just couldn't do it. The Virginia chapter was easy because I walked out of there. Oh, God, guys, give me a break. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's hard. If I didn't have enough time to do that, I don't know. A second book, maybe the articles, because I got a bunch of articles and they get more interesting by the minute because I got time to write 1,250 words, and there's no guardrail on them, and I know that. So I don't know. That may be another book. I'm happily retired.
You described yourself as a type A there, happily retired. So I'm assuming there's something you're up to. So tell us what you're up to now in retirement.
Your interview with your rep from Galaxy. Okay. I'd love to get together with him over a couple of really
That
great ones. So why?
Was that Jeff? Jeff
Yeah,
Marr?
that was Jeff.
Yeah, that's been a while. That was a long time ago.
It's
He was a great
okay.
guy.
For me, that's yesterday. I'm into antique rugs, rare rugs. I've got a rug guy. It's taken me a long time to get to the level where I can sit down with a rug expert and talk rugs. I got a style. In fact, this thing is a big stack of books on rare textiles. I don't have a lot of them, but I'm willing to hold out for something that was given to a 12th century mosque and is a shred. In fact, all these are on this little mosque shred. That's the rare collecting right now in rugs. And so I research this stuff when I'm not doing wine writing, researching for the gig. I'm researching rugs. And for him to say, oh, by the way, I was in Turkey and Istanbul selling rugs, I was like, oh, wow, that's a dream, man. I was in France buying wine, but I was never in Istanbul buying rugs. So my rug guy and I meet frequently, and we do that. We get, yeah, our rug religion. I'm looking at this thing right now. I got this about a week ago. It's 1825. It was from a 12th century mosque. It's a little bit of a thing. They're not expensive. You just have to find somebody whose collection they want to give it up or sell it. So that's what I do. Yeah, yeah. And we go out to dinner. Judy and I, you've heard about Portland, Maine. Yeah, yeah, foodie town. Yeah. We go out to dinner. We talk about the dinners we've had, the dinners we're going to have, the dinner we're having tonight. We're like little French people. We do that. I mean, we're all over that, man. Yeah, we are all over that. We go out probably once or twice a week. And we know the restaurant people. That's why I hate sommeliers. One of our favorite people is an oyster person, and she wants to be an oyster sommelier. It's like, give me a break. Can't you just be an oyster person instead of an oyster sommelier? So we do that. We've joined some groups of local seafood stuff. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. So you mentioned earlier your visit to DRC. Aside from that, tell me about an unbelievable bottle of wine you've had.
Oh, Jesus, where do you start? The most recent unbelievable bottle is something I chased for 10 years. Eduardo Valentini. You ever heard of him? No, he's obscure. I got into Italian wines big time. We go to Rome every year. Okay, Rome, ancient, dirty, funky, the Mithraean temple underneath the church. And I said, I've really got to get some of the classics. And to me, classics aren't Barolo, Barbaresco, that stuff. It's the Abruzzos, Trebbiano de Abruzzo, Emilio Pepe, Eduardo Valentini. I chased that damn bottle of wine for 10 years. And I found it in a restaurant in New Orleans. And that was like, now we are people who will drink a $6 bottle of wine on a Tuesday night, and I won't even think twice of it. Yeah, come on, I was selling wine at Trader Joe's. But when we're there and we're at the main temple, and I'm looking at a bottle of wine I've been chasing for 10 years, I barely even remember the dinner. It was that great. The other one, oh, there are lots. Oh God, there's so many. The other one I found in New Orleans also, it's Domaine Newman. Huh? Domaine Newman? No. It's in one of Matt Kramer's books. Matt Kramer, Making Sense of Burgundy, the Bible. I knew Matt, but his books were astonishing. And he mentions this guy named Robert Newman. And he says he's the first American to own a Grand Cru vineyard in Burgundy. Well, why not? And he's from New Orleans, and he's a banker. And he invested in Lachine, and Lachine screwed him out of his money, of course. So Newman gets a vineyard. And we found in New Orleans his Bon Le Acrote from Domaine Newman, the last vintage that they ever made at Domaine Newman. That is just breathtaking. And that's been within the past year or so. I mean, I'm not afraid to go out there and look for stuff for 10, 20 years and dig deep. And that's why New Orleans is so great, because they're deep in their lists. And you can find things there that you won't find wherever. Ramené is another guy. Ramené. I don't even know if you've got Ramené in Oregon anymore, but Ramené is the greatest Burgundy producer, other than Romani Conti is the greatest Burgundy producer I've ever put in my little lips. And we found yet another bottle of his stuff in New Orleans. You can go spend $800 in New York if you want to, but the one we found in New Orleans was about $150. And yeah, I will search for 10 years for a great bottle, but I'll drink a $6 bottle of wine on Tuesday night. I'm a vernacular guy. That's how it works.
So the best wine is the wine in front of you, right?
Yeah, the best, and it's occasionality. Occasionality is everything. It's a Tuesday night. What are you gonna have on a Tuesday night? Well, I'm not gonna have damn Romani Conti on Tuesday night. I'm really not. I'm gonna. You don't need to save it for the big special occasion. It may not be the big special occasion. I just celebrated my 80th birthday with my buddies at a little wine bar, and we were drinking a Heights Cellar Cabernet, which was delirious. The occasion was great. The people were great. Yeah, it's occasionality. Sometimes that little $6 bottle for Tuesday night is as good as anything. Yeah, to me, that's what wine is all about. Tasting wine with that Spanish guy in that bodega that no American ever saw that's exhilarating. That's as good for me as not so quite Romani Conti, but it was very, very good. Yeah. You have to kind of work your way up to stuff. If I hadn't had Burgundy and San Francisco and France and all that and Oregon and worked my way up, then I wouldn't understand. And that's the beauty of it, is once you work your way up, started out in Burgundy, then moved to the harder stuff, to quote Bob Dylan. Yeah, there he is. Once you work your way up and you know what you're going to be experiencing or have some idea, when it's a shocker like that Irie South Block was a shocker when I had that. And the 73 Napa was a shocker when I had that, the Stag's Leap. But for most of it, you have to work your way up. And that's the fun. That's the fun. Don't think if you're into wine, don't think you're just going to limit it to Tuesday night wines. Because, I mean, that's okay. That's fine. I never dissed those people at Trader Joe's. You want to drink Tuesday night wines for the rest of your life? Fine. You may have a limited income. You may not be into it. That's fine. You may like Budweiser. That's great. I'll never diss those people, ever. But if you want to move up, and I moved a lot of people up in Trader Joe's, from the cheap stuff to, oh, by the way, we've got this Oregon Pinot Noir here. Inscription was the big dog. I found that before the enthusiast even was born. We had that on the store. It was like, you want to see Pinot? You want to see what it's supposed to taste like? Yeah, take that $6 stuff and make it go away on a Friday night. Try this. And yeah, that's how you move it. That's how you move people. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I could talk to you all day, but that's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything else that you wanted to cover here while I've got you?
No, tell your intern, keep up the good work. You know, keep hiring those Gen Zs, man.
Yeah.
That's the key. That's the secret.
It's the great thing about working in a college. I always know what the youths are thinking. There's no way around it.
Yeah, you got to sit down and have lunch. Have lunch with the Gen Zs.
I've been doing interviews now for like the better part of a decade, 800 some interviews we have now. And I've been waiting for someone to quote Bob Dylan talking about starting out on Burgundy. And I'm so glad someone finally did. I've been just dying for that. So thank you for quoting from one of my favorite albums of all time.
I actually saw him live in '63.
Oh
Joan Baez at the Hollywood Bowl was doing a concert. She said, "Oh, by the way, I'd like to introduce somebody on stage that you've never heard of." And he comes on stage. I said, "Damn, my life has changed."
Amazing. That's incredible. Well, thank you so much, Layne, for sharing your story with us, taking the time to be part of our project, and for checking out all the interviews you did ahead of time. We appreciate you
Thank you.
tuning in and checking us out.
Yep.
Appreciate it, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.